Good afternoon. Before I begin, I want to express my deepest condolences to the community of Monterey Park and to the families and loved ones who are grieving an enormous loss today. FBI and ATF are providing all support possible to our state and local partners, and they will continue to do so. All of us at the Justice Department are committed to doing everything in our power to protect our communities from gun violence and the terrible devastation that it brings. In addition, I should note that about an hour ago, a jury returned a verdict in a trial involving 4 members of the Oath Keepers in connection with their criminal conduct on January 6 surrounding the attack on the United States Capitol. All 4 defendants were found guilty of seditious conspiracy, as well as conspiracy to obstruct the certification of the Electoral College vote and to prevent members of Congress from discharging their duties. I am grateful to the prosecutors, agents, and staff for their outstanding work in connection with this matter. 50 years ago, the Supreme Court decided Roe versus Wade, holding that a right to abortion was protected by the Constitution. In the decades that followed, the court repeatedly recognized and reaffirmed this right. Again and again, these decisions recognize that few choices are more significant and personal than whether and when to have children, and few rights are more central to individual freedom than the right to control one's own body. For nearly half a century, that right was an essential component of women's liberty in this country. But last summer, the court overturned Roe and renounced this fundamental right. In doing so, it also upended a key element of the rule of law, the rule of stare decisis. Many of us feared that that decision would deal a devastating blow to reproductive freedom in the United States, that it would have an immediate and irreversible impact on the lives of people across the country, and that the greatest burdens would be felt by people of color and those of limited financial means. Unfortunately, that is exactly what has happened. Legislatures across the country took steps to impose bans and other restrictions on access to abortion, with devastating consequences for women's health, their safety, and their civil rights. On the day Roe was overturned, I said the Justice Department would use every tool at its disposal to protect the rights of Americans to their reproductive freedom. And that is what we have done, and that is what we will continue to do. In a few minutes, Associate Attorney General Vanita Gupta and I will meet with the members of the Reproductive Rights Task Force of the Department. The task force has been working tirelessly to protect access to reproductive care. The task force is composed of leaders from across department components. They are working cooperatively to monitor state laws and enforcement actions to ensure that states do not infringe on federal protections of reproductive rights. The task force is also evaluating appropriate actions in response to those laws, including filing affirmative suits, filing statements of interest, and intervening in private litigation. Last summer, the Justice Department filed a suit against the state of Idaho. We challenged criminal prohibitions on providing abortions as applied to women who are suffering from medical emergencies. The District Court for the District of Idaho ruled that a state law that attempts to prevent a hospital from fulfilling its obligations under the Emergency Medical Treatment and Labor Act, which is known as EMTALA, violates federal law and the Supremacy Clause of the U.S. Constitution. That decision has ensured that Idaho women are able to obtain the emergency medical treatment to which they are entitled under federal law, including abortion when that is the necessary treatment. The department and the task force are also advising federal agencies on legal issues related to reproductive health. The department's Office of Legal Counsel published an opinion advising the U.S. Postal Service that the Federal Comstock Act normally does not prohibit the mailing of mifepristone. The department worked closely with the Department of Defense on its policy allowing service members and their dependents to receive funding to travel out of state for abortion care. We advised the Department of Veterans Affairs on an interim final rule allowing access to reproductive health at VA clinics. Justice Department will support and provide representation to any federal employee who is subject to legal actions for appropriately carrying out his or her duties under federal law. We are also continuing to enforce the FACE Act, the Freedom of Access to Clinics Entrance Act. This law prohibits anyone from obstructing access to reproductive health services, including both abortion services and pregnancy counseling services, through violence, threats of violence, or property damage. Since January 2021, the department has charged more than a dozen cases involving dozens of defendants with FACE Act violations. And we are continuing to offer technical assistance to both Congress and the states on federal constitutional questions related to reproductive health care. I'm deeply grateful to Attorney General Gupta for her leadership in this effort. And I'm grateful to all of the professionals from across the department who are working to protect reproductive freedom. We will continue to do everything in our power to fulfill this department's founding responsibility to protect the civil rights of all Americans. Associate Attorney General Gupta.
Thank you, Attorney General Garland. I also want to start by offering my deepest condolences to the Monterey Park community, in particular those grieving their loved ones during Lunar New Year, a time that traditionally brings families together for what should be celebrations and joy. The Justice Department stands ready to assist during this difficult time, and we will continue to do all that we can to support the Monterey community. Thank you to the members of the Reproductive Rights Task Force and your components across the department who are working collaboratively, creatively, and relentlessly to use all our available tools to protect reproductive rights, health, and justice. The 7 months since Roe v. Wade was overturned have made clear just how much is at stake in this moment. Dobbs was and is devastating for people and communities across the country. And we know that the decision and the actions of state and local officials in its wake are having a disproportionate impact on the health and safety of low-income women and women of color. With every day that passes, there are still more reports of new efforts not only to restrict access to abortion, but also to chill and intimidate women from seeking abortion and other reproductive health services, even where they remain lawful. We established this task force as a whole-of-department effort to closely scrutinize these new complex and widespread threats to reproductive health for any infringements on federal protections. By design, the task force model allows the department to be coordinated and strategic in its response to these threats. Task force staff are working daily on the impacts of Dobbs, and as the Attorney General has highlighted, we have not hesitated to act, be it through the Idaho lawsuit, the department's ongoing FACE Act enforcement, or our other work advising agencies and conducting outreach to stakeholders about our collective efforts to protect reproductive health care. The challenges and hard work remain. A critical focus of the task force is on ensuring access to abortion medication. This includes protecting access to the drug mifepristone, which was approved more than 22 years ago by the U.S. Food and Drug Administration as safe and effective for the medical termination of pregnancy under certain conditions. We are vigorously defending the FDA in unprecedented litigation that is seeking to withdraw mifepristone from the marketplace, an action that would work severe harm to all who rely on the medication. And we are working to monitor recent state-level actions with respect to mifepristone that could implicate federal interests. Our message today is clear and bears repeating. The Justice Department, through the task force, is committed to doing everything we can to protect continued lawful access to abortion medication and other reproductive health services.
See? You mentioned affirmative litigation, and other states have similar laws to the one that is set up in Idaho, so I'm just wondering if you can explain a little bit about why we've only seen one such lawsuit. And separately, while we have you here, I'm wondering what you would say to critics who accuse the Justice Department of treating the former president more harshly than the current president in your doing parallel special counsel investigations.
Well, since you were looking at both of us,
Yes.
for the first half, I'll start, and then I'll turn that part over to Vinita, and I'll get back to your question.
Thank you.
As you know, the states are just back in session. They are passing laws. We are evaluating them as a continuing matter. That's part of the job of this task force. We are engaged in at least 3 major pieces of litigation. The defense of the FDA with respect to its more than 2 decades old approval of mifepristone. We are involved in the Idaho case, and we're involved now in defending the VA's interim final rule. And we will continue to monitor the situation as appropriate. I'll let Vanita answer any additional questions.
Yeah, I just think the key thing is the timing, which is that we've obviously been very active in monitoring what's happening in the states and locally, and given that most state legislatures now are coming back into session, we'll be continuing to do so and looking at any laws that may get passed that infringe on federal protections.
Now, on your other question, the department has a set of norms and practices that have been part of our DNA since Ed Levy was the Attorney General, the first post-Watergate Attorney General. These are essential for us to continue. They ensure that we adhere to the rule of law. These mean, among other things, that we do not have different rules for Democrats or Republicans, different rules for the powerful or the powerless, different rules for the rich or for the poor. We apply the facts and the law in each case in a neutral, nonpartisan manner. That is what we always do, and that is what we do in the matters that you're referring to.
Mr. Attorney General, at your direction, both former President Trump and the sitting president are under federal investigation. Do you have any regrets in the way that the department has handled this so far? I mean, ultimately, is this good for the country?
The role of the Justice Department is to apply the facts and the law in each case and to reach appropriate decisions in a nonpartisan and neutral way without regard to who the subjects are. That is what we've done in each of these cases, and that is what we'll continue to do.
Attorney General, as you know, former FBI agent Charles McGonigal was arrested, indicted, some serious charges involving foreign influence. I know it's new, I know there are allegations, but can you speak to how big of a betrayal this is to the FBI and to his country if these allegations are true?
Yes, so part of the norms and practices are that we, particularly at this stage, we limit ourselves to what it says in the indictment. Indictments are public. I believe there's a press release from both Southern District of New York and from the District of Columbia where the 2 different sets of charges are made, and I really can't go beyond that.